There was nothing special about that morning, just the hum of tired tires rolling down dusty roads, the rattle of an old soda machine spitting out lukewarm cans, and the sound of a socket wrench clinking against steel. Elijah Brooks had been fixing cars since he was 16. Folks around town said he had good hands, steady, quiet, respectful hands. He didn't talk much, didn't drink, didn't chase trouble, just raised his boy, paid his bills, and showed up every day at Carter's Auto Stop, where the red dirt stuck to your boots and the sun turned the pavement into steam. This is Mark Joie. Welcome to Injustice BROWEN, where stories live even when justice doesn't. If this story moves you, subscribe, leave a comment, speak his name. Elijah wasn't perfect. He could be stubborn as hell, sometimes too proud to ask for help, but he believed in doing right. Always had. He lost his wife, Lorraine, to breast cancer 3 years before. That kind of pain doesn't scream, it just settles in the bones. Quiet, heavy. So he poured himself into raising his son, Malik, who had his mother's eyes and his father's stillness. They lived in a modest one-story house with a cracked driveway and a basketball hoop that leaned just a little too far to the left. They didn't have much, but it was theirs, peaceful, honest, theirs. That peace shattered on a Tuesday dot. They found her around 6:45 a.m., a 17-year-old white girl, bruised and barely conscious, just off the side of the road behind the Chevron station 2 blocks from where Elijah worked. No witnesses, no camera, no footprints in the wet grass dot, but Elijah. He was there, clocked in at 6 a.m., grease on his overalls, radio low, humming out Green, doing what he always did. By 7:15, the police cruisers pulled into the garage lot. Officers stepped out slow, like they already knew something. Elijah looked up from the open hood of a busted Crown Vic and wiped his hands on a rag, just like he always did. "You Elijah Brooks?" "Yes, sir. We need you to come with us." He wasn't arrested. Not yet. Just a few questions. They said they didn't tell him what happened. Not really. Just enough to make his mouth dry. A young girl was hurt, close to here. "You see anything?" He said no. They asked again. Same answer. "You talk to anyone? Anyone coming for gas? You leave the shop at all?" He didn't. Not once. He hadn't even had his morning coffee, but something shifted in their eyes, like they were checking off a list that had already been written. It didn't matter that Elijah had worked there 12 years, that Mr. Carter, his white boss, called him the best damn mechanic I ever had. It didn't matter that he'd stayed late to fix the sheriff's daughter's Honda just 2 weeks earlier, or that he always put his customers first. None of it mattered, because the girl was white, and Elijah was the only black man working anywhere near that scene. Word got around fast. By noon, whispers turned to phone calls. By 4 o'clock, Malik came home from school with a busted lip. Said some boys on the bus called his dad the monster from the Chevron. Elijah still wasn't home. They held him for hours. No charges, no lawyer, just questions that kept circling like vultures. "What do you think happened to her, Elijah? You ever seen her before? Can you prove you were in the shop the whole time?" And he kept saying the same thing. "I didn't see anything. I didn't hurt nobody." But that didn't seem to be what they were looking for. At 10 p.m., Mr. Carter came to the station, demanded to speak. "You know he didn't do this," he told them. "He's been working for me for over a decade. He was at the shop all morning." They let Elijah go, for now. He got home just before midnight. Malik was waiting on the porch with a flashlight in his hand, eyes wide, jaw tight. "Daddy, what happened?" Elijah didn't say much, just hugged him, long and hard. His hands, still, stained with oil, left prints on Malik's back. He didn't know it then, but those would be the last free hours he'd have for nearly 30 years. It was the beginning of something that would take everything, but break nothing. Because even when the world turned on him, Elijah Brooks still had good hands, and God help the man who tries to destroy what he can't understand. You ever been in a room where the lights are bright, but somehow everything still feels dark? That's what it felt like to Elijah. Cold metal chair, a table that smelled like bleach, a flickering ceiling bulb, and 2 men in uniforms who didn't raise their voices, but didn't hide what they were thinking either. "We're just trying to understand, Elijah." That's what they kept saying, but every word they used didn't feel like curiosity. It felt like confirmation, like they already knew and just wanted him to say it out loud. "How long you been working there?" 12 years. "You take any breaks that morning?" "No, Sir, you sure about that? I said I didn't leave. Anybody see you stay the whole time? He paused, thought about it. No one was in the shop with me. Not until 7:30, I think. The officer scribbled something down like he'd just caught a lie. But Elijah wasn't lying. He just didn't realize that the truth stopped mattering the second they saw his face. They said it was just a statement, just standard. He didn't need a lawyer. He wasn't under arrest. So he spoke plain, thought honesty would protect him. But with every answer, the noose got tighter. And then they said the words. The girl woke up. Elijah blinked. She said it was a black man. That's all she remembers. Double quote silence. No description. No voice. No clothing. No name. Just a black man in a town where there were maybe 3 black men within 5 blocks of that gas station. And Elijah was the only one who'd been working that morning. They let that hang in the air like smoke. You ever talk to her? No. You know who she is? No. You ever have inappropriate thoughts about young girls? Elijah sat up, his jaw clenched, his fingers curled into fists in his lap. I told you I don't know her. I didn't see her. I was working, like I do every day. The room got quiet again, but this time, it felt different. They stopped asking, just stood up, walked out. He sat there for hours, alone, no clock, no window, just the buzz of the fluorescent light overhead. By the time they came back, they had paperwork. They didn't look angry or surprised, just tired. You're under arrest, Elijah. His heart dropped, but his face didn't change. For what? Aggravated assault, attempted rape. The cuffs clicked over his wrists like they were always meant to fit there. No evidence, no prints, no weapon, no motive. Just a girl in a hospital bed, too scared to see straight, saying 3 words. And the world took it as gospel. By the next morning, the local paper had his mugshot on the front page. Auto mechanic arrested in brutal assault. They didn't say his name until the 3rd paragraph, but the photo said everything. Malik walked into school and felt the stares before he opened his locker. Kids whispering. A teacher looked at him like he was contagious. One boy, a sophomore with a mouth too big for his head, spit at his feet and said, like father, like son. He didn't fight back, just went to the bathroom and cried in a stall until 3rd period ended. That night, someone threw a brick through their living room window. It landed inches from the couch. Malik screamed. He called 911, voice shaking. The police came, took a statement, swept the glass, then left without saying much at all. They didn't ask if he was okay. Neighbors stopped speaking. One old lady who used to bake peach cobbler every Sunday crossed the street to avoid Malik walking home. The pastor from their church didn't call. The mechanic shop closed the next day for maintenance. The sign said it was like his father had disappeared and the world was trying to erase everything connected to him. Malik visited the jail. That weekend, Elijah looked tired, not broken, but tired in a way that sleep couldn't fix. They really think I did this, Malik. I know, Daddy. They ain't even trying to prove nothing. They just decided. Elijah reached out through the glass, put his hand against the cold divider. Malik pressed his palm to the other side. And in that silence, you could feel something shifting. Not just fear, not just grief, but a deep, burning injustice taking root, because when they already decide you're guilty, your innocence don't matter. Your words don't matter. Your life don't matter. All that matters is you fit the part. A black man. At the wrong place. At the wrong time. And the worst part, they knew it, and they did it anyway. It didn't feel like a trial. It felt like a funeral. Not the kind with flowers or hymns, but the kind where you bury someone alive and call it justice. Elijah sat at the defense table, wrists uncuffed but spirit bound. The courtroom smelled like polished wood and old air. Everything looked official. The flag, the seal, the black robes, but none of it felt fair. His lawyer, a public defender with too many cases and not enough hours, barely spoke to him. In the weeks leading up, told him not to expect miracles. We just need to make a case for reasonable doubt, he said. But he didn't say it like he believed it. He said it like he was already tired. The prosecutor, though, he was a showman. Tall, crisp suit, confident. He spoke to the jury like they were children he was protecting. Said Elijah was an opportunist, that he waited for a moment of vulnerability, and that a man who keeps to himself is often hiding something. The crowd nodded along, even though none of it made sense. The timeline didn't fit. The girl was found near 6:45. Elijah had already been working since 6. No break. No record of him leaving the garage. The only so-called evidence? A vague testimony from a frightened teenager who couldn't describe the man's face, couldn't remember the color of his clothes, couldn't even place the direction he came from. But she said the words, "black man," and that was enough. The prosecutor brought in a so-called forensic expert, showed the jury some fibers, a broken watch, some half-matching footprints, none of it tied directly to Elijah. But it sounded complicated, and when something sounds complicated in a courtroom, people think it must be the truth. Elijah's lawyer didn't object much, didn't cross-examine hard, didn't bring in a single character witness, not Mr. Carter, not the customers who knew him, not the friends who would have vouched for where he was. Malik sat in the second row every day, watched the jury as they watched his father, 11 white men, 1 white woman, not a single face that looked like theirs. They didn't look angry, just closed, like their minds were already packed away in a box labeled guilty. One moment stood out. The girl took the stand, fragile, pale, voice trembling. They asked her, "Do you see the man who did this to you in the courtroom?" She hesitated, looked around, then she looked down. I don't know." The room went still. Even the prosecutor froze for a beat. But then he leaned in and said, "Sometimes trauma makes memory fuzzy. But we know what the evidence shows." And just like that, her doubt didn't matter. The truth didn't matter. Only the story they'd already written in their minds. When the jury came back, the silence was louder than the verdict. Guilty, on all counts. Malik felt like the floor dropped out under him. Elijah didn't flinch, didn't blink. The judge said the words like he was reading from a grocery list. Sentenced to life in prison. No possibility of parole. Elijah looked over his shoulder, found his son's eyes, and said 5 words. "Be better than me. Be stronger." That was it. No tears. No outburst. No, "I didn't do it." Drama like on TV. Just a man who knew this place was never made for him. Not the courtroom. Not the jury. Not the justice system that claimed to see all men equal. They took him out in shackles. And Malik just stood there, 15 years old, watching his father disappear behind a door that was never meant to open again. And in that moment, something shifted in him, because when the law is blind, what your skin is what they see first, you stop believing in justice, and you start fighting for truth. Prison doesn't just lock the body, it buries the soul. Not all at once, not loudly, just slowly, quietly, like dirt being shoveled over a casket, one scoop at a time. That's what it felt like for Elijah Brooks. A number instead of a name, a cell instead of a home, cold air that never changed seasons, concrete beds, metal trays, gray walls that didn't even pretend to care. The first year, he barely spoke. The second, he stopped asking why. By year 5, they stopped calling him new fish. By year 10, they stopped looking at him at all. But inside that silence, Elijah built something. He fixed what he could. Broken radios, bent fan blades, the washers that wouldn't drain. If it had a motor, Elijah could make it run again. Word spread. Inmates started showing up at his door, young men with too much anger and not enough fathers. They asked him how to change a spark plug, how to sand rust off a fender, how to keep your hands from shaking when your head's about to explode. He taught them everything he knew, not just about engines, about holding dignity in a place that was designed to strip it from you. Control what you can touch. He'd say, "Fix what's in front of you," and they listened. They called him Old Man Wrench, some with respect, some with envy, but none with pity, because even in that uniform, even behind that fence, Elijah walked like a man who still knew who he was. Meanwhile, the world outside kept spinning. The news forgot, the courts forgot, the town forgot, but Malik didn't. At first, he was angry all the time, at the justice system, at the white boys who whispered rapist as he passed, at God, at the sound of keys, at the way teachers looked at him like a ticking clock. But anger only took him so far, so he turned it into fuel. He studied hard, finished high school early, got into college, took law classes before he even knew how to pay for them, worked nights, slept in libraries. He made his own way because the world had already shown him it wasn't going to give him one. And every year on his father's birthday he sent a letter, same opening line every time. Still fighting, still believing, still your son. Every Christmas, he filed another appeal, paid court fees with whatever he could scrape up, spent nights digging through case law, comparing signatures, looking for loopholes nobody else cared to find out. All of them got denied. Insufficient grounds. Appeal dismissed. Request denied. But he kept going, because the truth was, simple. His father didn't belong in that cell, and he'd be damned if the story ended there. Sometimes Elijah wouldn't answer the letters for months, not because he didn't care, but because he didn't want to say the wrong thing, didn't want to weigh his son down with the cold. When he did write back, the letters were short. Careful, proud of you, keep your head straight, don't let their hate in. And then one that broke Malik's heart when he first read it. I dream I changed your brakes again. You kept trying to watch me do it, but your eyes were full of light, and I couldn't look straight at you. Felt like you were already gone. That letter came in year 18. By year 20, Malik passed the bar. He stood in front of a mirror in a suit that didn't quite fit and whispered, "I'm coming, Daddy." The world had long since buried Elijah, but under that dirt, under those years, under that silence, something still breathed. Hope. Not loud. Not pretty, but alive. And that was enough. There's something dangerous about the truth, not because it hurts, but because once it's out, it refuses to go back. And Malik Brooks was 30 to the day he stepped into the county clerk's office with a briefcase in one hand and his father's case file in the other. A lawyer now, full suit, calm on the surface, but underneath, fire, years of silence, building pressure, waiting to speak. He had eyes like his father's, but his words were sharper. He started from scratch. Every page, every timestamp, every statement. Late nights, cheap coffee, highlighters run dry. He didn't look for magic, just mistakes, and he found them, one by one, like cracks in the wall. First, the timeline. Record showed Elijah clocked in at 6:01 a.m. The girl was discovered at 6:45, but photos taken by the responding officers showed her injuries had been fresh, only minutes old, which meant the attack happened closer to 6:40. Not enough time for Elijah to leave the garage, walk the 4 blocks, commit the crime, return, and be back under a car by 7 o'clock like 3 separate customers remembered seeing. Next, the detective SGT. Wallace Monroe, retired now, but his record had history, multiple complaints over the years, mostly from black defendants, allegations of pressure, coarse statements, sloppy procedure, buried under bureaucracy. But Malik found a pattern, and then came the girl, now a grown woman. She had left the town long ago, changed her name, moved states. It took Malik months to find her. When he finally did, she didn't slam the door. She let him in. They sat in silence for a long time. Then she said something that made his chest ache. "I don't know if it was your father. I never did. They told me that's who it was. I was scared. I was 17. I didn't want to get anyone in trouble, but they told me he already confessed. I thought I was just confirming what they knew. Elijah never confessed. Not once." That single sentence cracked the case wide open. But even then it wasn't enough. Malik filed a motion to vacate the conviction. Denied. He filed again. Denied. Third time. He attached sworn affidavits, independent analysis, chain of custody violations on the so-called physical evidence, the shoe print, wrong size, the hair fiber, mishandled, the police log, altered, someone crossed out names, still denied. That's when he turned to the public. He found a reporter from Atlanta, a woman who made a career out of digging into lost stories. Her name was Jordan Tate. She listened. She didn't promise anything, but she showed up the next week with a camera, a notepad, and questions that made the town nervous. The article dropped on a Thursday. Convicted by color, the forgotten case of Elijah Brooks. It didn't make national news, but it made noise, too. Much for the judge to ignore. Too much for the state to pretend didn't exist. The retrial was granted on a rainy Monday morning. 27 years, for months, and 8 days after Elijah was convicted. He walked into that courtroom thinner, older, but not broken. He wore a simple gray suit. No tie. The jury this time, mixed, young, alert, people who lived in the same town, but in a different time. Malik stood to deliver the opening. He didn't shout. He didn't pace. He just held up a copy of the arrest record, shook his head, and said, "My father was convicted before anyone asked whether the clock on the wall was telling the right time. Today, we ask." This time, they listened. They saw the holes, the contradictions, the silence between the lines. They heard the woman, who now told the truth without fear. They saw the reports, the files, the parts that never added up. And in the end, it wasn't dramatic. The jury deliberated for 2 hours. Not guilty. Elijah didn't flinch, not right away. He just closed his eyes. And for the first time in 27 years, breathed like a man standing on the right side of the door. They asked him if he had anything to say. He looked at Malik, then at the judge, then straight ahead. I've been silent for so long. I don't even know what words to use. But I thank God, I thank my son, and I pray this never happens to another man again. He walked out of that courthouse not as a free man but as a returned one. The town didn't throw a parade. No apologies from the state. No news van waiting to tell the world what they missed. But it didn't matter, because Elijah Brooks was free, and the truth that waited for him, it never stopped breathing. He stepped out with nothing but a paper bag in time. No crowd, no camera, just open sky and the sound of gravel under his shoes. Elijah Brooks didn't smile when the gates opened. Didn't cry either. He just looked ahead like a man who had already left long ago and was finally catching up to his own life, gray in his beard now, a little slower on the knees. But his back was still straight, and his eyes were still steady. That's what prison couldn't take. His son was waiting. Malik leaned against a borrowed car, dressed sharp as always. But this time, he didn't look like a lawyer. He looked like a boy seeing his father come home. They didn't hug right away, just stared for a moment. Then Elijah said, "You taller than me now." Malik smiled. "You still stronger." They laughed and hugged like it hurt. No media was there. No handshake from the governor. The state gave him a check, like freedom could be measured in dollars. But Elijah didn't care about that. He had something more valuable. Time. They went back to the neighborhood. Not everyone remembered. Not everyone wanted to. Some still crossed the street. Some still whispered. But his community, the people who knew they were waiting. Old Miss Hattie made cornbread and collard greens. Pastor Drew said a prayer under the pecan tree. Mr. Carter, his old boss from the garage, cried like a baby when he saw him. It wasn't a parade. It was better. It was home. Elijah didn't give speeches. He didn't tell his story on talk shows. He just got to work. Bought a little garage on the edge of town, same one where he used to fix up beaters with his son. Cleaned it out. Brought in new tools. No banner. No big sign. Just a small one painted by hand. Brooks Auto Repair. Honest work. And people came, not because they pitied him, but because they trusted him. He still had those same good hands. The ones they tried to chain. The ones they tried to stain. The ones they couldn't break. He showed the neighborhood kids how to replace brake pads, how to check oil, how to keep your engine running smooth. Same way he used to teach the young men in prison. He didn't tell them what he'd been through. He showed them what was possible. As for Malik, he opened his own law firm to towns over. Brooks and Justice. That's what he named it. First case. A young man locked up for a crime that evidence never proved. Malik took that case like it was personal, because it was. Every win was a piece of his father's time reclaimed. They didn't chase headlines. They chased freedom. And over the years, they freed more than a dozen wrongfully convicted men. Each one walked out into sunlight because two men refused to stop fighting. Sometimes Elijah would come by the office, drop off sandwiches, tune up the company car, shake a few hands, and every now and then, they'd sit together on the back steps, father and son, and just breathe. No courtroom. No bars. Just stare. Just time. Just peace. One afternoon, Malik asked him, "How did you survive that long without losing your mind?" Elijah didn't look up. He just said, "I fixed what I could touch. The rest, I gave to God." That was Elijah Brooks. The man they couldn't break, because his spirit wasn't made in a courtroom. It was made in grease-stained shirts, quiet, Sunday mornings, and the hands of a man who taught his son how to be strong, even when the world tried to prove him weak. This isn't just a story about injustice. It's a story about survival, about what happens when a lie tries to bury the truth, but the truth keeps breathing. Under the dirt, they tried to take his freedom. They tried to take his name. But in the end, Elijah walked out with both. And now, his hands are still good, still kind, still free.